Cruelty doesn't need words, just witnesses. That night in the diner, laughter came from the wrong table. Four men thought they were funny, pouring mockery with their drinks. But the waitress didn't hear the jokes. She couldn't. She was deaf, smiling through silence, wearing strength like an apron. When the glass tipped, it wasn't just soda that spilled. It was every insult she'd ever swallowed. And before the laughter died, Jasonstatham raised a finger, and the diner froze. Before we continue, to our returning viewers, thank you. Your support is what fuels us to bring these powerful stories to life. And if you're new here, we invite you to subscribe. With your help, we'll continue to share stories that inspire, challenge, and move hearts. And if this story touches you, please leave us a comment. Your words mean more than you know. The diner smelled like rain and burnt toast, one of those late-night places where the jukebox never works and the coffee tastes like it's been reheated since morning. Outside, thunder crawled across the sky. Inside, the laughter didn't belong. Four men in work boots and weekend arrogance owned a booth near the counter. They weren't regulars. You could tell by how loud they were, how they needed everyone to notice. The waitress moved between tables, light on her feet, her smile shy but practiced. A small hearing aid blinked behind her hair, barely noticeable if you weren't looking for it. They looked for it. "Oi," one of them called, tapping his empty glass. "Refill, sweetheart, and maybe pay attention this time." She turned, caught his lips moving, and smiled the way you smile when you've already learned not to flinch. She nodded, poured the drink, careful, steady. But when she set it down, the man grinned at his mates. "Watch this," he said. Then he tipped the glass. Cold soda drenched her apron, splashing across her arms. The glass hit the floor, shattering. The men roared with laughter, clapping like schoolboys. "Oops," the one in front said, feigning shock. "Guess she didn't hear me say stop." The diner froze. The cook glanced up from the grill. A couple near the door whispered, uneasy. But no one moved. No one ever did until someone had to. At the far end of the counter sat Jasonstatham. Black jacket, hands wrapped around a mug of untouched coffee. He'd been quiet since he walked in, just a shadow keeping to himself. Now he set the mug down, eyes lifting from the counter to the reflection in the chrome napkin holder. He saw everything. The waitress bent to pick up the shards, shoulders trembling. Her lips moved, a small apology that no one should have had to give. One of the thugs raised his phone, recording. "Smile for the camera, love." Jason's hand twitched once. A single finger rose. That's all it took. The laughter stopped mid-breath. The cook blinked as if the air itself had shifted weight. The thugs turned toward him. "What, you got something to say, Grandpa?" the leader sneered. Jason didn't answer. He just stood, chair legs scraping against linoleum, steady and slow. He walked toward them, boots landing like punctuation marks. No rush, no show, just certainty. The waitress straightened, shaking, eyes darting between them. Jason stopped beside her, picked up the towel she'd dropped and set it gently on the counter. "You're all right," he said, voice low, gravel over thunder. She didn't hear him, but she felt it. The calm in his face, the steadiness of his hands. She nodded once, breath shallow. Then Jason turned to the table. "Apologize." The leader blinked. "What?" Jason's tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You heard me." The thug laughed, looking around for approval that didn't come. "Who do you think you are, mate? Her dad?" Jason took one step closer. "No, just someone who knows how to act like one." The laughter didn't return this time. The youngest man fidgeted with his napkin, whispering, "Leave it, man." But the leader's pride was louder. He pushed his chair back and stood. He was taller, but Jason didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't care. "You think you scare me," the man said. Jason tilted his head, studying him like a mechanic studies a part that's about to break. "I don't think about you at all." The thug's hand moved first. A shove meant more for the crowd than the target. Jason didn't budge. His eyes flicked to the spilled glass on the floor, then back to the man. "Pick it up." "What?" Jason nodded toward it. "You made the mess, clean it." The man's smirk faltered. "You serious?" Jason's silence was the kind that left no room for jokes. The leader glanced at his mates, searching for courage. "Nah, I ain't picking up nothing." Jason stepped forward, close enough for the man to see his reflection in his eyes. "Then I will." He crouched, gathered the largest piece of glass, and set it on the table in front of the man. "You ever cut yourself on truth?" he asked softly. The man frowned. "What's that supposed to?" Jason pressed the glass down until it cracked again, sharp enough to make the man flinch back. "That's what respect feels like when you've never held it." The second thug jumped up, puffing his chest. "Enough, mate. You think you can come in here and—" Jason's hand shot out. Not a punch, not a grab. Just one finger raised again, steady, commanding. "Sit." And somehow he did. The cook whispered, "Bloody hell." The waitress watched, wide-eyed, towel clutched to her chest. Jason leaned on the booth's edge, calm as the eye of a hurricane. "You boys think cruelty's a sport. You laugh at people who can't hear you, because you're scared of the ones who can see you." The leader tried to speak, but the words tangled. "You don't know nothing about us." Jason's voice dropped lower. "I know enough. You mistake kindness for weakness. You mistake silence for surrender. Tonight, you'll learn the difference." The air in the diner thickened. Even the neon hum seemed to dim under his voice. The leader swallowed, his bravado leaking through every breath. "You don't scare me." Jason leaned closer, whispering so quietly only the men could hear. "Then why are your hands shaking?" The man looked down. They were. Jason straightened, apologized to her now. The leader's mouth opened, but pride strangled the sound. His mates stared, waiting. The room felt like a held breath. Finally he muttered, "Sorry." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Didn't catch that." Louder this time, "I said I'm sorry." Jason nodded once. "Better." He turned toward the waitress. She blinked, unsure, watching his lips move. Jason pointed to his chest, then mimed writing in the air. The cook understood, sliding a notepad across the counter. Jason wrote quickly, then handed her the page. It said, "You deserve respect. Don't let them teach you otherwise." She read it, tears mixing with the water still dripping from her hair. Then she smiled, a small, fragile thing that held more strength than any punch. Jason's job was done, or so he thought. As he turned back toward his seat, one of the men whispered something sharp, something ugly. The kind of word you don't say when you still value your teeth. Jason stopped mid-step. The cook whispered, "Oh no." Jason turned back, expression unreadable. "What you just say?" The man swallowed, shrinking into his jacket. "And nothing." Jason stared for a long moment. Then he reached for a napkin, wiped the spilled soda from the counter and tossed it into the bin. "Then you'd better mean it." He walked back to his booth, calm, collected. But the air didn't loosen, not yet. The waitress poured him a fresh cup, her hands still trembling. Jason nodded, grateful. "Thank you." She mouthed the words back, "Thank you." He smiled faintly. "No," he said softly, "thank you." The night moved on, but the tension stayed. The four men sat in silence, staring at the table, their laughter long gone. And for the first time in a long time, the diner felt safe again. But the thing about pride is, it doesn't go quietly. When Jason left his tip on the counter and stepped out into the rain, the four followed, their shame twisting into something meaner. They thought the fight was over. They were wrong. Rain stitched the night together, thin lines under the streetlights, humming on the metal awning above the diner door. Jason stepped onto the sidewalk like a man who already knew the weather, the street, the way trouble sounds when it thinks it's quiet. He didn't put his hands in his pockets. He didn't hunch against the cold. He just let the rain find him. The door creaked again. Four shadows spilled out, every one of them trying to look taller than the fear chewing at their edges. The leader wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, like he could rub the humiliation off. The youngest hung back, eyes flicking from Jason to the puddles, the same way a kid watches an oncoming wave and pretends he can stand his ground. Two more stood shoulder to shoulder, breathing like they'd just sprinted but refused to admit it. It would have been easier if they'd gone home. Cruelty could have slept off its hangover. Pride could have found a different target, but easier never learned anything. Jason didn't turn around right away. He watched the reflection of their faces in the diner window, four warped masks in the glass. When they reached the curb, he finally pivoted, boots cutting lazy half-circles in the water. "You followed me," he said, voice low enough to smooth the edges off the words. The leader forced a grin. "We're just getting some air, mate. You got a problem with that?" Jason shrugged. "Air's free, but if you're common for a second round, I charge for repeats." The man took a step forward, splashing a puddle onto his own jeans. He didn't notice, or he thought he couldn't afford to. You think you can embarrass us in there and just walk off? You embarrassed yourselves, Jason said. I did housekeeping. One of the others barked a laugh that died halfway out of his throat. Big talk for a bloke alone. Jason glanced at the diner window. The waitress stood just inside, 2 fingers to her lips, breathing fast. She looked at him the way people look at chances, careful, afraid to hope too hard. He lifted a finger, small gesture, same one he'd used inside. Calm down, you're safe. Then he looked back at the men. Walk away, he said. That's the last offer you'll get. Another grin, another inch of water kicked toward him. Or what? Jason's answer was a silence so complete it sounded like a promise. The leader moved first because men like him always do. A shove dressed up as a punch, shoulders ahead of his hands. Jason took 1 step inside the arc, almost gentle, and brushed the strike aside like dust. His elbow came up precise, not angry, and fit itself under the man's rib cage. The sound the leader made wasn't a word. It was a question his body asked before collapsing. The two in the middle surged together, brutish confidence in stereo. The left one aimed high. Jason dipped under and used his forearm like a lever, guiding him into the other with a sharp shoulder check. Skulls clicked. Balance vanished. Bodies pinwheeled. Jason let them fall into the parked sedan with a tremor that set off a distant car alarm, one metallic howl, then embarrassed silence. The youngest hadn't moved. Not forward, not back. Stuck between fear and the need to be seen, he clenched empty fists and stared at Jason like a man trying to remember a prayer. Jason turned to him without hurry. Don't, a single word, weight of a brick. The kid's throat worked around a swallow. He dropped his hands. I didn't. Go home, Jason said. The kid nodded, legs already choosing the direction his pride couldn't. He ran. The rain made quick work of his footsteps. Behind Jason, the leader rolled over and wheezed something that wanted to be a threat. He didn't let it finish. He walked to the man, crouched, and spoke softly enough that only the fallen could hear. You're going to leave, and you're going to forget the sound of her silence like it's none of your business. Because it is. You understand me. The man coughed, pain crackling through his answer. You don't get to. Jason adjusted his grip on the man's jacket, 2 fingers, a nudge, and the argument dissolved into a groan. I'm not asking permission, he said. A taxi turned the corner, headlights sliding across wet asphalt and faces that didn't deserve the light. Far away, a siren tried to remember if it needed to care. Jason let the rain settle back into its rhythm before he stood. Get up, he said. They did, slower than they wanted, more broken than they'd planned. He pointed to the far end of the street. Walk. The leader spat red into a puddle and stared at Jason long enough to try on a dozen different mistakes. None of them fit. He jerked his chin at his mates and limped into the dark, each step a smaller person than the one before it. They didn't look back. Bullies never do when the audience leaves. Jason watched until the night swallowed them. Then he turned to the glass and met the waitress's eyes through their twin reflections, hers bright with leftover terror, his flat as a calm sea. He lifted his palm, held it there. She mirrored the gesture, confusion folding into relief. He nodded once and reached for the door. Inside, the diner air hugged him, the way cheap heat always hugs, clingy, grateful, a little desperate. The cook's eyes were dinner plate wide. You all good out there? Jason wiped his boots on the mat and scratched a flake of gravel from the heel. Rain's good for the street, he said. Washes rubbish away. The waitress stepped closer, towel in one hand, the other hovering like she couldn't decide what to do with it. She watched his lips carefully. Jason slowed down his speech, clear and simple. Are you all right? She read it, then nodded, though the breath she let out told a truer story. He pulled the notebook from the counter, wrote a line, and turned it toward her. You did nothing wrong, not tonight, not ever, for being yourself. Her eyes welled. She pressed her lips together, a soft thank you shaping on them. The cook slid a mug under the coffee machine as if he'd been waiting for permission to breathe. The neon on the window hummed back to life, late to its own shift. Jason should have gone then. That's how his stories usually end. Coffee unfinished, lessons learned, exits quiet. But endings have a way of testing themselves. The door shivered, not open, not yet. Just a draft, a warning from the weather. The bell finally rang. 3 figures stepped in, each one larger than smart and twice as sure. Leather jackets with cheap bravado stitched into the seams. The one in front had a scar that didn't belong to him and eyes that liked to see fear arrive early. The one on the right carried a weight in his pocket that sagged the fabric and made his stance cockeyed. The last one looked bored. He was the danger. The waitress stiffened. The cook's hand drifted to the phone, hesitation glued to his fingers. Jason set the notebook down and turned, rolling his shoulders like he was preparing to sit, not to stand. "Evenin'," the scar said. The word sounded like a dare. Jason's gaze didn't move to meet it. "You're late." Scar frowned. "To what?" "Whatever mess you think you came to make." The bored one smirked barely. "He's got jokes." The heavy pocket shifted his weight, eyes drifting past Jason to the waitress. "Heard our mates got embarrassed," he said. "Came to test the myth." "Which part?" Jason asked. "The bit where you think hurting strangers proves you're alive, or the part where you end the night with new ways to limp?" Scar nodded at the door. "Lock it." The cook froze. Jason didn't. He moved first, past the counter, past the waitress, to the entryway. He reached up and flipped the sign from open to closed, then slid the bolt home with a click that sounded like a verdict. He turned back, hands empty, eyes not. "You wanted the room," he said. "You've got it." The bored one's smirk twitched. Heavy Pocket's hand hovered near the sag in his jacket, confidence shrinking around the edges. Scar cracked his knuckles like a man knocking on a door he'd regret opening. Jason spoke without raising his voice. "This is a place for food and quiet," he said. "You won't find either if you take another step." They took it anyway. Scar lunged in a straight line like the shortest path to mistake. Jason stepped diagonally, almost elegant, one foot slicing the puddled tile. His hand met Scar's wrist, twisted it until the bones remembered they were designed to obey, then guided the man into the edge of a booth. Wood groaned. Scar's breath left him, offended more than injured. Heavy Pocket went for what he thought he needed. Jason's palm hit his forearm on the way there, shoving the hand into the wall hard enough to jar the brain attached. The metal clattered on tile, small, ugly, loud. Jason towed it under the jukebox without looking down. The bored one didn't rush. He stepped in smooth, chin tucked, hands up, something like skill hiding behind the night's stupidity. Jason saw it and nodded once, the way one tradesman acknowledges another. "Finally," Jason said, "someone who learned a few things before deciding not to use them." They moved, simple and nasty, the way real fights are when you're done pretending. Board feinted twice, quick, testing distance. Jason let the first miss air, parried the second with a forearm that turned skin to stone, and slid a straight right into the lane Board had opened with his curiosity. It wasn't big. It was true. Board's head snapped, disgust more than pain crossing his face. He adjusted. Came again. Jason changed levels, stepped inside, and clipped him with an elbow no longer than a thought. That one he felt. Scar recovered enough anger to be stupid again. He came from behind with a broken bottle that hadn't been there a second ago, must have snatched it off the counter on the way. Jason pivoted, grabbed the nearest sugar dispenser and smashed Scar's hand with a sharp downward pop. Glass rang. The bottle fell. Scar howled. Sugar snowed across tile. Jason caught Scar by the collar, leaned him toward the door like a man delivering a package, and spoke softly against the storm, pressing its face to the glass. "What you're feeling now," he murmured, "is cause and effect." He shoved him out into the rain and let the night hold him. Heavy Pocket shook his hand like he could wake it back up and came forward with a roar to replace a plan. Jason didn't reward it. He slid left, let the charge pass, and guided the man's head into the chrome corner of the pie display. That sound wasn't pretty. The man sagged, then folded, then slept. Board stayed up because bored men always do, stubborn in the way of people who have just enough training to respect themselves and just enough stupidity to destroy it. He wiped his mouth, looked at Jason for a long second that almost contained a thought, and put his hands down. "I'm done," he said. Jason looked at him, waiting to see if the truth would hold. It did. He nodded at the door. "Take your friend with the sugar freckles. Leave the other one. He'll walk when his head remembers him." Board didn't thank him. Smart. He dragged Scar backward, one step at a time, eyes never leaving Jason's. When they hit the bolt, he hesitated, then looked at the waitress. She had one hand over her mouth, the other clenched white around the towel. "Sorry," Board said to her, barely audible. She read his lips. She blinked, surprised, then gave the smallest nod a person can give and still be seen. Jason flipped the bolt, opened the door, and let the night reclaim what it had loaned. Rain rushed in, then out. Quiet rushed back. The cook exhaled hard enough to fog his glasses. That was unnecessary, Jason said, but his eyes were kind, and therefore required. The waitress approached him slowly, like he was a wild thing that chose not to bite. She searched his face, then the torn seam on his sleeve where the bottle hadn't found blood. She pointed. He looked down, then waved it off. "I've had worse from a tailor," he said, enunciating. She smiled, quick and helpless. Then she tapped her chest with a knuckle twice and pointed to him. He didn't pretend to understand. She reached for the notebook. He slid it over. Her handwriting was neat as a prayer. "You didn't have to do that." He read it, then wrote beneath. "Maybe not, but someone did." She pressed her lips together and nodded. Then she wrote again. "People laugh because they think we can't hear them. They forget we can see." Jason's mouth tilted. Half of a smile, the part men like him allow a room when it's earned it. He tapped the line with a knuckle, then underlined C. The cook poured coffee into Jason's mug, then, thinking better, added another beside it and nudged a plate of pie into the space like an offering to a quiet god. "On the house," he said. "You've done enough for the till tonight." Jason didn't argue. He sat. He sipped. The rain softened, as if the weather had finally run out of things to say. Time stretched. The heavy pocket groaned from the floor and rolled to his side, hands patting the tile until he found the chrome base of a stool like it might apologize. Jason watched him without malice. "You'll live," he said. "You won't enjoy it for a few hours, but you'll live." The man squinted up, confusion tangled in embarrassment. He opened his mouth, found nothing worth using, closed it again. He crawled to the door and left his pride to pay the bill. Jason finished the coffee. The pie remained mostly untouched, the way trophies often do when you didn't come for them. He slid cash across the counter, not just for what he took, but for what he'd returned. The waitress shook her head and pushed it back. He pushed it forward again. She tried once more. He lifted a finger, the same finger that had frozen a room, and she laughed without sound, the first clean laugh of the night. She took the money and tucked it under the register. The siren finally found the block late, apologetic. Red and blue strobes licked the wet window. The cook's shoulders climbed toward his ears. The waitress's eyes widened, old fears resurfacing in new light. Jason stood. "I wasn't here," he said. The cook nodded quicker than he had all night. "Weren't where?" "Exactly." He turned to the waitress. She hesitated, then reached for the notebook one last time and wrote, "Thank you for being loud," without a voice. He looked at the words for a long second, then at her. He lifted his hand and traced a simple circle in the air with his finger, slow, deliberate, like sealing something. She mirrored it, a pledge between strangers. He walked to the door, flipped the sign back to open, and cracked the bolt. Rain applauded once, soft on metal. He paused, looked back at the room, and delivered his verdict in 12 quiet words. "Let them order food or silence," he said. "Not fear, not here." Then Jasonstatham stepped into the night and let the door whisper close behind him. By morning, the story filtered through the neighborhood like sun through blinds. People arrived for eggs and word of mouth. Some came to see the crack in the sugar dispenser, others to ask about a man who asked for nothing. The waitress worked, lighter on her feet, shoulders unburdened by an apology she no longer carried. When customers spoke, she watched their mouths and their eyes and found that, for the first time in a while, they matched. The four who had started it learned the oldest lesson pride ever meets. Humiliation heals slower than bruises. They kept their laughter on short leashes after that. The ones who came after them found different doors to step through. And whenever the bell over the diner rang late, people looked up, not in fear, but in the practiced comfort of those who know that if trouble walks in, so can something else. Because help doesn't always arrive with sirens and speeches. Sometimes it's a finger raised in a room that's forgotten how to listen. Sometimes it's a man who drinks coffee in the corner and prefers not to be noticed. Sometimes it looks like the quiet left behind when cruelty runs out of audience. That night the diner kept the neon on a little longer. The cook said it was for the late shift crowd. The waitress, drying a clean glass, watched the door and knew better. It was for the silence, and for the next time someone tried to break it.